And good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Tech Intel Tuesday. It's 2 o'clock somewhere. I tell you, we are doing some Q&A today because I didn't have anything prepared. I spent all day yesterday, literally all day, 11 hours at the county courthouse in a jury selection for a murder trial for a shooting that happened here back in 2021. This guy, I won't say too much. Well, it doesn't matter now. I wasn't selected. I'm not on the jury. I can say whatever I want, I believe. But this guy went nuts and killed one person and shot some other people, including a Department of Public Safety trooper from here in the state of Texas, DPS trooper. And he was, I guess they claimed insanity. And, you know, it's interesting. You go in the jury selection and everyone said, oh, yeah, you'll be out by noon. It was definitely not out by noon. You get there like 8 a.m. and you get called back and you go in there, and I was juror number 63. I learned a lot about the court process, basically. At any rate, you go in there and you fill out a questionnaire, and then the DA, the prosecuting team, talks to you for a little while and tells you about what the Fifth Amendment is and, you know, other things. And then they might ask you some questions, and then we left, and then we waited around for like a couple hours, and then we went back in there, and then I was juror number 79 out of 90. And then they asked you a bunch more questions. Then the defense team asked you some questions and blah, blah, blah. And then they picked their people, and then they let us go for like another 2 or 3 hours while they talked about the jurors. And I guess the judge said this is really not a jury selection process. It's a jury deselection process. They try to kick as many people out of the jury pool as they can. And then I guess it's luck of the draw. I did not get drawn. At any rate, it's going to be a week-long trial. Look, I mean, I don't know. I was prepared to serve either way. At any rate, let's go ahead and get into Tech Intel Tuesday. I'll say this. Very interesting experience from yesterday. Has nothing to do with intelligence, but I learned a lot about murder trials. And again, this is not intelligence, but in the state of Texas, one of the big problems is we had a bunch of jurors that basically held up the selection process, asking questions. And there are 3 outcomes in a murder. It was not a capital murder trial. So this guy was going to be found guilty, or he's going to be found not guilty, or not guilty by reason of insanity. And the defense team spent a lot of time instructing us on exactly what that is and what that means and what that isn't. And our roles in finding this guy not guilty by reason of insanity, it's very obvious this guy, the defense team, is going to plead the insanity case. One of the big problems was we did not know, none of the jurors would know if we found this guy not guilty by reason of insanity for murdering people, for shooting like 6 or 7 other people, including a Texas state trooper. If we found him not guilty by reason of insanity, which means he had a severe disease or mental defect at the time of the event took place, no one could tell us what happens to this guy. For all we know, he'd be out on the street the next day. That did not sit well with a lot of jurors in my county, which was somewhat, I was somewhat pleased to see that. At any rate, it's written into Texas law. No, the prosecuting team, the defense team, the judge, literally nobody can tell jurors what happens to this guy if they find him not guilty by reason of insanity. And meaning maybe they put him in an insane asylum, or maybe he's literally out on the street the next day. The guy, if the guy is the other thing that a handful of jurors held up this process on is, first of all, temporary insanity does not exist in the state of Texas. You cannot say, oh, I was temporarily insane when I shot these people, but I'm all better now. So how is this guy insane 40 years ago, and now he's okay enough to be found not guilty by reason of insanity, and then just kick him out the front door and he's loose and free? At any rate, lots to consider. We are talking about a handful of questions today. We do have some questions, and I'll go ahead and get them teed up. If you do have questions, please drop them in the chat. Just to reiterate, I don't have anything prepared this week because I spent all day yesterday doing something else. But the first question is, how do I balance time between tactical preparedness tasks like shooting, first aid gear, packing your 200-pound bug-out bag, and local intelligence work? Well, I understand it's a lot. There's a lot there to fit in. And a lot of people are learning new skills. Ham radio takes time, practice, like hands-on practice to develop those skills. Shooting takes hands-on practice. You can't get good by just reading about shooting, et cetera, et cetera. And intelligence is the same way. You've got to spend time doing it. I would say this. Remember, there's kind of two ways to look at intelligence gathering. There's passive and active. And active is I'm going out and I'm being deliberate in the kind of intelligence I'm looking for, or intelligence information that I'm looking for. And then passive is I'm going about my normal course of duties. And if I hear something, okay, that, I can remember that. If I see something, okay, I'll remember. That's more passive. Okay, you like just catching it in passing. So when you drive places, you're driving to the shooting range, you're driving to the ham radio meetup, whatever you got going on, just look around you. I think that's something that everyone can do throughout your day. Intelligence can be practiced literally every waking hour. We don't have to go to the range. You don't have to go to a classroom. You don't have to be in front of a computer to practice intelligence. So I would say just start off by being cognizant. Develop a mindset for looking for information of intelligence value as you go about your day. Note things, write them down, take notes, add them to your conclusions, or put them in your area study, or put it in a file that you keep on a computer or wherever you house this stuff, or I should say store this stuff. At a very basic level, everybody should be doing that. Everyone should be a passive collector of local intelligence, reading the news, watching the news, whatever. The other thing is, let's think about proficiency. What is the most likely emergency scenario that you are going to face? And then come up with what we call mission essential task list, METL, mission essential task list. What are the skills? What are the tasks? What are the knowledge that you need for that emergency? Intelligence is going to be in almost every single one of those. Shooting, probably not going to be in all those, but it's going to be in the important ones. So just think about the scenarios you're likely to face and then determine what your intelligence needs are. Determine what your intelligence skill requirements are. What skills or what tasks do you need to know how to do in order to navigate that emergency? Write those down and then probably prioritize those mission essential tasks, things that you got to know how to do for that mission, to accomplish that mission. And maybe that's monitoring the local river levels to make sure your home doesn't get washed away, or your vehicles or your property. Maybe you think that's going to be bugging out of a city from work. I don't know, whatever you think that is. Dealing with an inevitable financial crisis or economic crisis or recession or something far worse. How do you manage the risks in your neighborhood? Predominantly the people who may pose risks in your neighborhood. How do we manage those people? Whatever the scenario is, write down the mission essential tasks and skills that you need to know how to do, and then focus on developing that. A lot of people, and I know people go to the range and they say, I'm going to set up a 750 or 1,000 meter target, and I'm going to spend all afternoon plinking away and walking in rounds or whatever. Okay, that's fine as a hobby, recreationally, but don't pretend that's like preparedness stuff. Don't pretend like you're going to be engaging targets at a kilometer away. It's just not realistic. So just be realistic. All right, there are some questions here that we will get to. Any recommended software for doing OSINT? Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. It depends what kind of open source intelligence work you're doing. If you're doing social media network analysis or social network analysis, it's going to be different. I would probably say something like Maltego. And Maltego is great. It's not cheap, but it is extremely useful. If you're doing more news type work, then I would look at something like Feedly or some kind of aggregator where you can punch in specific sources you want to follow. Before Elon Musk bought Twitter, you could could type in all the Twitter accounts that you wanted to follow, and Feedly would just import that into your dashboard. So you can just sit there and monitor stuff as it comes up or check your different feeds. You can have topical feeds, so like feeds off of keyword. If you're looking for a specific individual or a specific place or a type of event, you can do these keyword searches. You can follow specific sources of news. So your local TV news, whatever, internet-based media outlets. So I would, if you give me like a specific mission or a specific type of OSINT you're looking for, I'd like to give you a better answer. But I would say if you're doing social network stuff, social media, Maltego 100% is the way to go. There's some Maltego competitors out there. I've never used them. I know there's other people like Data Miner and Silo Breaker and some of the other big data streams like on steroids. They're also not cheap, but I have used Silo Breaker. So, I haven't used them in years, so I don't know if they're any good still or not, but they work. Data Miner, I hear lots of good things about Data Miner, so I hope that helps. All right. By the way, if you have a question, just drop a Q in the front of your question so I can find it easily. Follow on to OSINT question. My big problem with research data organization is how to organize it all. Okay, yes, that is a problem. So there are kind of notebook apps out there that I really like. I used Evernote for a long time. Today I use Obsidian. And those are just, it's like a digital notebook. And you can have different notebook pages that you can copy and paste information into. You can have different notebooks for different topics. So I use that. I think it's a really good, Obsidian is what I use. I think it's a fantastic way to organize information online. All right, Mr. Roman with the super chat. Thank you, sir. I presume it's sir. I don't want to presume your gender. First time live chat. Thanks for your work. Because of it, my intel gathering and preparedness overall has increased 50 since 2020. Thank you, brother. Well, thank you, brother. And listen, I'm glad. I'm happy to do this. I like teaching this stuff or just even giving people my advice or recommendations. I certainly appreciate that. If you do have a specific question, definitely let me know in the chat. How do you use AI? How do you see it being used in the future? Great question. So I've tried to, first of all, I use ChatGPT basically like every day. And I like it a lot for certain tasks. I've tried to use ChatGPT to give me like an intelligence roll-up. I did not have a lot of success. Eventually, it will catch up. So eventually, you probably will be able to jump into ChatGPT and say, here's my zip code. And everything is based on prompts, right? The better your prompt, the better your input into that, the better the output you're going to get. Here's my zip code. Here's my major news sources locally. And if you want to try this with Grok, you can too. I haven't tried it with Grok. Give me a threat intelligence report for Tuesday, the 15th of July, 2025. Using information over the past 24 to 72 hours. I don't know, whatever. Try it out. Just try it out. I think that's one way that AI will be used. I'm not sure that AI is still able to do what I know AI cannot do what a human can do. I talked to a guy that was running like basically search and rescue operations in disaster relief, humanitarian aid work in between, like around San Antonio during the floods. And I can guarantee you that if you had someone sitting on AI, on ChatGPT, and then you had me running everything from weather to local conditions to news updates, significant developments, significant activities, etc. I would blow ChatGPT out of the water 100%. And I know that because I've tried to use ChatGPT, and it works well on some things. It does not work well on others. That said, capabilities are increasing every day. Maybe this is going to be like a, Paul Bunyan thing, whatever the story was. The machine, eventually, the chainsaw, whatever, eventually beats Paul Bunyan. Yeah, sure, maybe eventually one day. So I think that's a really good use case, even just now. Just ask it for like a local, hey, give me a local intelligence update. And just go through there. One thing that ChatGPT does now is it includes sources. So I have noticed that cases of hallucination where GPT just makes stuff up has been reduced substantially, at least from my experience, because I can go in there. It still from time to time misunderstands or misses some context. I've noticed in some of the articles. A couple months ago, I asked it to write me a financial intelligence report, and it tried to tell me that Bitcoin passed $50,000, which, I mean, technically it did already, like a couple of years ago. So lots to catch up there. Other things, I think just from like a big data perspective, if you're running Feedly, this is actually an interesting use case, or would be. If you're running on Feedly or some kind of other aggregator, and you have so many sources of local information, local news, you have local social media, you got Reddit, you got X, you got Facebook, whatever stuff piping in through there, it's going to be more than you are going to be able to manage unless you're just doing this full time and you're sitting there for 8, 12 plus hours a day scrolling through these feeds. One thing I think AI will eventually be able to do is you can give it a bulk of data and you just say, hey, look, here's 1,000 news articles from the past 24 hours and social media posts from the past 24 hours. Give me the top 100 that you think are most relevant. And if you had some kind of feedback mechanism where it says, okay, this is the number one thing that I think is most important. You say, actually, yeah, this is not number one. And you had some way to help it learn, refine what it gives you. I think that's a fantastic use. And if someone's not developing that, frankly, you should, because you'll probably be a millionaire. Realistically. Considering everything that's coming in the future, things are going to get a lot worse in the future. So local intelligence is going to be a lot more important. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah, John Henry, I don't know, whoever. Where the machine beats the human. Eventually we may get there. I thought John Henry was a WWE wrestler. Would you ever do it and I'm joking, I remember the story about John Henry. Would you ever do an in-person meetup, build community practice, get hands-on experience? Yeah, of course. Yeah, I've done a lot of meetups. Actually, we need to start doing them fairly regularly. Bring everyone in from Central Texas. Yeah, I need to get back on the road and start teaching courses too. I teach a 3-day Tech Intel course, and it is hands-on. I teach you what it looks like. I teach you how to do it, and then you go do it. And we do that over the course of 3 days. And you come away, my goal is after 3 days, you exit that class with some knowledge and hands-on experience to actually run intelligence operations, or at least maintain situational awareness during an emergency. So yes. And there's also, I'm not sure if we're going to do this, but in the fall, we may have like a big meetup, try to get, Forward Observer folks from all across the country. If you want to join us, that would be fantastic. More on that later. All right, the next question is, what are the best local sources for early warning indicators of political or social unrest, and how do I vet them? Okay, so if you're building something like an early warning matrix, that is geared toward an event. And the way these early warning indicators work is you say, will there be a riot? Or will there be political violence? And typically you're going to have a place or a time frame. Will there be a riot in downtown Austin, Texas? or downtown, wherever you live? Or will there be a riot this weekend anywhere in the Austin area, or, whatever? And typically, so that's what we call a priority intelligence requirement. Typically, that's going to be a yes/no answer. Yes, there will be a riot on Bakalakadaka Street in Austin on Saturday, the whatever July this is. So that's a yes/no thing. We can look at this and say, yes, there will be, or yes, we think there will be, or no, I don't think there will be. And what that allows a commander to do is make a decision, because a PIR, priority intelligence requirement, supports a decision point, typically. So that commander says, yes, there's going to be a riot. Well, I've got to take my personnel and my resources and manpower and everything I have, and now we've got a plan on how we're going to respond to this riot. Or, no, there's not going to be a riot this weekend, in which case a commander says, okay, we're going to prioritize the next highest risk thing, or we're going to go do something else, because we're not going to have to respond to this riot. And that's how it works in the military, at least in the Army. So if you are trying to build a local early warning matrix for an event, first we have to figure out what that event is. There's going to be heavy rains coming through this area. By the way, it's not just in Central Texas. It's rained basically every single day for the whole month. July is the driest month in Austin, Texas, and I would imagine most of Central Texas. And we've gotten 300%, about 300% of the monthly average in the first roughly 15 days of July, and there's still 15, 16 days left. And we're up over 300% from what we normally get in a July. But this is not just happening here. There's flooding, I don't know, in like Tahoe, California somewhere, / Nevada. In Pennsylvania, there's a video in I think New York City, the subway was flooding or something like that. So this is happening everywhere, or a lot of places. And you're not crazy if you ask. First of all, if you identify that amount of rain is above baseline, first of all, you're not a conspiracy theorist for noticing that. And frankly, I think we should be questioning at some point, is this just a natural weather pattern? Because this stuff does happen. Or is this maybe an unnatural weather pattern? It's a fair question. And I hate the people that just go, I'm just asking questions. It's a fair question to ask. So if you are trying to say, all right, I want to be ready to respond to the next flood, to help rescue people, or make sure my family, maybe we live in or near a flood zone. Where I saw one lady the other day, she said, I live in a 100-year floodplain, and I'm not sure what to do. Well, this is definitely a 100-year flood, the stuff that we've seen. So it's good that you're noticing that. By the way, I think last week I shared everybody should go get the floodplain data. You can get this stuff for free. It's MSC, as in Mike, Sierra, Charlie.fema.gov. Go type in your home address and get the floodplain data, not just for your neighborhood. Just go ahead and get it for your entire county. If you have a home in the hills, you got a ranch, you got a bug out property, you got grandma or Aunt Shirley's home, get it for them too. Check that stuff out. If you got to go rescue grandma, you definitely want to know where the floodplains are before you have to go rescue grandma. At any rate, you pick the event that you're trying to predict, and then we take one step back and we say, this event just started. What has happened? What are the preceding factors? What needs to have happened before this event starts? So let's start with a flood event, and we'll do a protest or riot event. So you say, okay, and we can just estimate it. If we get more than 3 inches of rain in a 24-hour period, then we will have flash flood conditions in these flood zone areas. Okay, so that's the first thing. One indicator might be our local meteorologists predicting more than 3 inches. Yes, no, that's the first indicator. The next indicator is, or could be, ground saturation. Maybe Maybe that's another thing we're looking for. The drier the ground is, and this is just how it is in Central Texas. When the ground is really dry, it's like hard crust. And what happens is water does not seep into the soil. It stands on the layer of dirt there. And so flash floods actually become more likely. Whereas if the ground is already a little bit soft because it's rained in the past, then you're more likely to have a lot of that rainwater be absorbed in the soil. So you might look in that and say, are the ground dirt conditions, and I'm not a hydrologist or a geologist or whatever, but you might say, are local ground conditions conducive to flash flooding? Maybe has it rained in the past week or the past 2 weeks? I don't know, whatever. Probably go and talk to your ag extension office as well, or talk to meteorologists and ask them, what things do you think have to happen for us to have a flash flood? And maybe they'll rattle off, 3, 5 things. Actually, this is probably worth asking. You know what? Maybe we'll do a show on this. Let's do this. I'm going to try to track down a meteorologist, if you know, or a hydrologist, or someone who would know, a flash flood expert, whatever, a floodologist. And maybe we'll talk about that. If you know somebody, get in touch. Drop them in the comments, ping me on social media, shoot me an email, whatever. And let's talk about this. This would actually be really handy to have, to be able to give people. So what you do is you just find all those early warning indicators, the things that would lead you to believe a flash flood is likely or a flash flood is not likely. And you just do yes, no, yes, no, yes or no, yes or no, yes or no. And let's say we had 10 indicators. Let's say we had 10 indicators of flooding, just overall. And we do a checklist. We say, oh, we're going to have bad thunderstorms come through here tomorrow. Let's go through this indicator list and let's see if we should be preparing, if we should be spinning up for search and rescue operations or some response to this disaster response to this flood. And maybe only 2 you have yes or positive indicators on 2 of the 10. Okay, so that looks like flash flood's not impossible, but it just does not look real likely. Versus 7 or 8 or 9 positive indicators, early warning indicators of a flash flood. That's when you should be seriously spinning up, talking to neighbors, your community, mobilizing support, et cetera, whatever. Okay, so I hope that helps. That's how you build out local early warning indicators for like a flood. Now let's do this also for a protest or a riot or some sort of civil disturbance. So let's think. It's Friday night at 10 p.m., 8 p.m., whatever, sun goes down, the zoo creatures come out. What has to have happened for that riot to kick off? So a couple of things. Right off the top of my head, number one, was there a trigger event? Was there a police-involved shooting? Is there some other agitation that's going on at the local level? Was there some national level or state level or local level event that increases the social temperature to get people to riot or to elicit that kind of response? That's number one. Is there a trigger event? Number 2 would be, are groups that are historically involved in protests, riots, etc., active, or are they involved in this trigger event or this potential trigger event? Or are they organizing? Are they mobilizing via social media, via email lists, via websites, blogs, whatever? Yes or no? Yes, there's agitation on their social media site. Yes. Is there agitation or incendiary comments on their blog? Yes or no? Are there incendiary or are they agitating via email? Yes or no? Okay, so we start to build that early warning indicator list. And the more yeses we have, the more likely it is that, just generally, the more likely it is that a riot or protest is going to happen. So that's generally how I would build out. I mean, that is how anybody in intelligence would build out an early warning indicator matrix. So I hope that answers your question. All right, just real quick, let me check on the questions here. How would you structure an intel team? All right, Iceman, I'm really glad you answered this question because I've been meaning, I don't know, probably 6 months ago. There was another video that I watched on YouTube, and I said, that's actually not how I would build my intel team. That's not how I'd build my intel cell. I think there's a much better way to do that, and I never made the video. So I'll just tell you now. 2 to 4 people, I think, is a really good. Listen, everything depends on the mission. If you are worried about your neighborhood, if I had 4 people, let's just say during an emergency, and everything is mission dependent, everything is always going to be mission dependent. But depending on the emergency, if you have 4 people, people number 3 and 4 may get kind of bored. Again, depending on the event. But let's say you had a riot and you're trying to track this thing all night. The first thing I would take into consideration is, maybe not the first thing, but near the top of the list, duration. How long is this going to take? Because if you have something that lasts 24 hours, we can all stay up for 24 hours. But if you get 48, 72 plus hours, now we're going to have to think about shifts. So, because bad things happen at night. So, and maybe sometimes the worst things happen at night. So now we don't have 2 people. We've got 1 people, a shift of 1. Or we don't have 4 people. We got 2 people in 12-hour shifts. And maybe there's some overlap. Maybe you're running 18 hours. I don't know. Whatever. That's up to you. So let's just say we have 2 people. Actually, anybody, just give me an event. Pop it into the chat. Give me an event that you think that you would have to respond to at the local level, realistically. And if someone says riot, we'll just say a riot. Okay. You live in a downtown area, or you live in an urban area. Maybe you have a business nearby, or maybe you live in an apartment or a condo or whatever have you, near where this riot is going to take place. And you are concerned, you want to battle track this. We'll do Wildfire next. And you want to battle track this to make sure that you don't incur, you want to judge your risk. What is your risk? What are some things that could happen to you during this riot? So this is obviously something that is it going to, it could very likely last through the night. Probably not going to last into the daylight morning or to lunch the next day, obviously. So our duration here is going to be probably 12 to 18 hours. So if I have 2 people, we probably don't have to go on shifts. I would suggest, regardless of how many people you have, if you got more than 1 person, you have to have a leader. You have to have an intelligence officer, someone to make the decisions. There is no intelligence by consensus. There is no any kind of operations that you got to have an intel officer. Like, you've got to have someone that says, here's how we're going to structure this intel cell. Here are the tasks that need to be done. Here's the training on how to do those tasks so they do get done. Here's our output. These are the intelligence products we're building. This is the mission that we are supporting. And you've got to have 1 person. So I would start with the intelligence officer. Regardless of what the officer does, you got to have 1. So that's number 1. Number 2, depending on the event, so in this case, this would be a riot, you've got to more or less what's called battle track. And what that means is you can do this on map or acetate. So map and a clear plastic overlay. And that's old school. With the way things are going, that's eventually going to become new school. Or you can do it on ATAC or Google Earth or whatever thing you have online or on the computer. So a map man, a battle tracker, whatever. I typically call him the map man. But the battle tracker is responsible for taking information and putting it on a map. And what happens is, over time, when you accrue, okay, someone set a trash can on fire at this intersection. Okay, I'm going to drop a pin and say trash can fire here. Or if I'm running a map and overlay, I'm going to draw a square or diamond or whatever and say trash can fire. And a group of riders broke a window. They smashed a window at Starbucks. I'm gonna drop another pin. It's a smashed window. Riders here. Or there's a march that's going from the 1500 block of Bakalakadaka Street to the 3000 block of Bakalakadaka Street. So I'm just going to draw a box all along that entire route. And I'm going to say, protest route or march route or whatever. And we are going to, the great thing that running this kind of overlay battle tracking situation does for us is it helps us visualize raw data. There's a fire here. There's a shooting here. There's a fight here. There's a whatever. It's kind of noise. But when we put it on a map, when we put it on an overlay, now all of a sudden we're looking at the security picture. So in this case, this security picture would be of utmost importance. So I would say if you're a team of one, focus on battle tracking. If you're a team of two, definitely have someone doing battle tracking, running the map, making sure that we have as clear, solid a picture of the security situation as we can. That would be like probably the number two guy. And always remember, with intelligence, we are supporting a decision. So for you, that might be, when do we batten up the hatches? When do I tell my employees not to go to work tomorrow? Or when do I shut my store down because of this riot that may be happening? When do we just pack up everything in our apartment and leave? If there's going to be like prolonged riots, you obviously don't want your family in and around that situation. So always consider what your mission is. Consider what your decision points are. And this is a job for the intelligence officer, which is probably like person number one, is identify the mission, identify what you're actually supporting, the decision that you are trying to arrive at, develop your PIR, your priority intelligence requirement based off of that. Again, that's typically going to be a yes/no question that leads to that decision. Identify your indicators. So this is another thing I would have the intelligence officer do. Build out that early warning intelligence matrix so that we can get advanced warning on the likelihood that this will or won't take place, or is likely to or is unlikely to take place. And then start looking at the second and third order effects of that. Yes, we think this is going to happen, and here's what you can expect in the first hour. Here's what you can expect in the first 6 hours, the first 12 hours, first 24 hours, the next 72 hours beyond that. Because now we're not just alerted to saying, oh yeah, this is going to happen. But now this is what this neighborhood is going to look like in 12 hours. Now what do we do about it? And that's intelligence. Intelligence is not OSINT. Intelligence is not scraping videos off a Telegram and putting them on your Twitter channel, even though that's real popular. Intelligence reduces uncertainty about the future. Intelligence is supposed to, if done correctly, is supposed to give us expectations of the future, accurate expectations of the future. If we have accurate expectations of the future, then we can plan for those things. Not just X is going to happen, but as a result of X happening, Y is going to happen, and then Z is going to happen. And if we know that Y and Z are going to happen, we can plan for that. And that's what intelligence really allows us to do. So number one, intel officer. Number two, battle tracker. Depending on the length, depending on the duration of this mission, and depending on how much information you have, another person you should consider having, whether it's the intelligence officer or person number three doing this, is requirements manager or collection manager. We'll call him collection manager. You're going to have a lot of collection requirements. Are there protesters at this intersection? Is there a law enforcement response to the protesters? Or someone, these rioters are trying to smash up a bank, or they're trying to break into this campus building, or they're trying to break into this building over here. Okay, or police now responding to this. So you're going to have a lot of intelligence gaps. You're going to have a lot of pieces of information that you need to know, but you don't know. And that's called an intelligence gap. We take those intelligence gaps, we write a statement or a question that reflects that intelligence gap. So is there a law enforcement presence at this intersection? Are police responding to this campus occupation or this break-in at this building? The reason why we want to have collection management is because, well, for two reasons. Number one is anytime we have a requirement, a collection requirement, we want to task that out to be collected. What that means is we have our collection assets, right? So last week we talked about the 4 primary intelligence gathering methods: open source intelligence, human intelligence, imagery intelligence, signals intelligence. That means that we have assets. We have radios, we have people, we have gear, we have drones, we got whatever. Computers. And now what has to be done is not every collection requirement is equal. Okay, these things have to be prioritized. We have to prioritize the most important pieces of information that we can, or that we have. We got to prioritize our collection requirements. And what happens is, if you're an analyst or you're someone submitting the collection requirement, what is most important to you may not be what's most important to the mission. And so this is something a collection manager does. Is he says, all right, let's first look at the collection requirements that are going to answer the PIR, because that's priority intelligence requirement. That's mission critical. If we do not answer the PIR, we fail this mission, or we make it substantially more likely that we're going to experience mission failure or strategic shock or whatever. Okay, bad stuff going to happen. So what a collection manager does is he looks at those requirements that support the PIR, and they get priority. So you've got one drone. Okay, that drone cannot be in 15 places at once. So we've got to figure out where that drone's going. That's something that a collection manager helps do. Anyway, I don't want to get too in the weeds of this, but consider having the second reason why you want to have a collection manager is once a piece of information has been collected, that requirement has been satisfied, it needs to be crossed off the list. We can't have assets go out trying to collect the same information that we've already collected. We don't need to do that. And so collection manager makes sure that doesn't happen. So we've got to 3 now. The intelligence officer who should be able to do every task. We have the battle tracker, which is like the top priority. You have to maintain the security picture of the area. We've got a collection manager. And then, I would say if you have a 4th person, put them on straight collection. Put them on Twitter, or put them on Feedly, or put them on Maltego, or put them on whatever for open source intelligence. Remember, OSINT is going to be your highest ROI, or return on time invested, in most cases. It won't get everything, but the bulk of what you do get will probably come from OSINT. In a majority of cases, that is not every case. Remember, everything's mission dependent. If we're in a grid down scenario, we have 0 OSINT. So obviously I would not prioritize OSINT. So everything's mission dependent. Everything depends on what your operating environment or operational environment looks like. But in general, those would be probably my 4 people. I'd have an intelligence officer who can do anything, cover down anywhere, probably do collection, probably do analysis. We haven't really even gotten into specific products. I would have a battle tracker. I might have a collection manager who is probably going to be doing a lot of collection himself. And then I would just have one person that's probably just basically like a rabbit. Go talk to this person, hop on the radio, talk to this person. Here's this phone, talk to this person, and just gather information. In general, that's probably about how I would set up my ACE. And this video I saw talked about like future operations, and we got to have a FUOPS guy, and you got to have all these things. And guys, 9.5 times out of 10, you are not going to be concerned with future operations. You're going to be concerned with the here and now in an emergency situation. You don't want to know why? Because most people are going to be very amateur intelligence analysts or intelligence gatherers. Basically, you're going to be de facto intel guy. You don't have the training or the experience. And so, again, 9 times out of 10, we're just concerned with the here and now. And if we get some breathing room, yeah, absolutely. Let's look at what the next 12 hours, the next 24 hours is going to look like. Most people, like in that flooding situation that we just saw in San Antonio, not a damn person was concerned about what the next 24 hours were going to look like. They're concerned about what the next 24 minutes is going to look like. That's another reason why you shouldn't even worry with FUOPs or future operations or all this other bullshit. Because it's like you got to have current ops. At any rate, I digress. Great question there. And we'll go through here the rest of the comments and questions if you'll just give me a couple of seconds. Okay, wildfires. So, yeah, let's say I got 2 to 4 people to stand up an intelligence section in a wildfire. Your PIR is probably going to be, when will the wildfire reach a point, or maybe it will be, will this wildfire, PIR number 1, will this wildfire reach my neighborhood? Or we can assume that it will, and then your PIR is going to be, when, at what hour will this wildfire reach my neighborhood? And we'll guesstimate that as best we can and get a working assumption that we can start planning off of. That wildfire may be sooner, it may be later, but you got to start somewhere. And also, as is the case with intelligence, the more information you have, we don't have crystal balls, contrary maybe to some belief. There was that you ever seen that Private Murphy, this little army cartoon that was in Stars and Stripes and maybe some other places, and it's like the door to the S2 shop is open, and it's just like a couple of Joes in there around a crystal ball. The S2 shop is the intel shop. It's a good cartoon. I should find it and put it up on a wall here. At any rate, we don't all, in more cases than not, we're not going to have enough information. We will not have sufficient amounts of information. Neither will you. That's just the nature of intelligence. We can't know everything. In very few cases, we can't know enough. Otherwise, it wouldn't be intelligence. It would just be news, like just facts. So if I was setting up something for a wildfire, like an intel team, I would definitely, there's a thing called the FLOT and the FLET. And the FLOT is forward line of own troops. This is very conventional. I'm just telling you. The forward line of own troops, if you've ever seen those historical Civil War battles, like you ever been to Gettysburg or Antietam or some other places, you've probably seen those maps where those red and blue dotted lines there, those are units on a battlefield. And so if you're on the Confederacy, then your forward line of own troops would be the red lines. Well, on these maps, it would be the red lines. And that was the forward, that was the forward extent of our lines. And then the other side of that would be the federal lines, and that would be the forward line of enemy troops. All right, so the FLOT and the FLET, forward line of enemy troops, forward line of own troops. Well, if you think about a wildfire, that's kind of like the forward line of the wildfire. Maybe that's the flow, forward line of wildfire. And so that's something that we want to track. That can be done with drones. This is going to be fast moving in many cases. A couple of years ago, we had really bad wildfires in like Central and West Texas. And those wildfires they're advancing 60 to 100 miles an hour because the conditions were so dry and the wind was so bad, and the wind was just pushing those wildfires. So the flow in that case is going to be very rapid moving, but to the best that we can, we want to maintain situational awareness on where the flow is. We want to look at the speed that flow is moving in, the forward line of the wildfire, or I'm sure firefighters have some technical term. I don't know what it is. So that's like the number one thing I would do, is maintain it as near real-time picture as possible. This may actually be a case where you would want to look and estimate if it doesn't rain, if wind conditions hold, we want to look. One great thing that every Intel shop should have is what's called a SWO, SWO, Staff Weather Officer. In all our cases, that was an Air Force meteorologist, because that's very important. If you got birds up in the sky, if you got any kind of drones, back then it was Predators, now it's Reapers and whatever else they have. We had Ravens and all sorts of stuff. It's obviously very important. If it's going to be raining cats and dogs and it's going to be high wind and low visibility, I mean, good luck. You're not going to have a Predator feed that day. You're not going to have a Predator up in the air dropping bomb, shooting missiles at people. So the weather is an extremely important part of all operations. And it just so happens that when you look at the 6 layers of your operating environment, it's physical terrain and weather. It's not just physical terrain, it's also weather. So this actually, in a wildfire scenario, this actually is a case where we want to be paying very close attention to what future weather conditions are going to be like. Is the rain going to, is the wind going to pick up? Well, our flow's probably going to be moving faster. Is the wind going to die down? Maybe the flow gets a little bit slower. Is it going to rain? Well, that's going to affect the flow. Or is it going to be hot and dry and low humidity for the next week? That's not going to be good for the flow. So this is, I don't want to get off into the weeds, but point is, this actually is, you may have one person, or for sure, one person's job in a wildfire scenario should be tracking the weather. Current weather over the next 6 to 12 hours, 24 hours out to 72 plus hours, for sure. That's got to be done. And I'm sure FEMA or some EOC out in the Mountain West have much better, maybe they have better ways of doing that. I don't know. Kill Ball says, I got your area study manual and it's very good. It's nice to have something that you don't have to piece out abstracts from field manual. Field manuals or other papers. Well, Kill Ball, thanks so much. I appreciate your support. By the way, I don't have any copies, any physical copies left, but we will do another run. But this book right here actually is up on Amazon. If you would like the ebook version, it's 200 pages. It's a solid manual. I mean, like it's a real manual. We got checklists and all pictures and all sorts of stuff in there. If you want to know how to build an area study, like this is the manual that you need. Just read through the book, take notes, build your area study piece by piece, and you too can have an area study. All right, Eric says, I'm interested in reading your library in the me too. I wish I had time. My problem is not reading. My problem is reading at the pace that I want to read. In the background, a list of books and your thoughts on them would be great. Yes, I will get a reading list out to everyone. I have an acquaintance. He worked at actually, I think founded a hedge fund. And he said, I'm quitting. And he sold off his stake in the hedge fund. And I said, well, what are you going to do now? And he said, probably just read. I'm envious. The Marine Corps Commandant's recommended reading list has some good stuff on tactics, leadership, and future threats. Subject matter. Yeah, I 100% agree. Every year when those come out, I always take a look at them and look at what the latest thing they're recommending. All right, guys, just real quick too, if you have any questions, please put a Q in front of your question. That way I can find it quickly. All right, moving on to the third question here. We've been going at this for almost an hour. I'll tell you what, we'll do like, I'll answer this question. We'll do maybe one or two more, and then we'll call it a Tuesday. What are the biggest mistakes people make when building their area study, and how do I avoid them? Well, the number one mistake that most people make when they start doing their area study is focusing on too large of an area. We have to be realistic. You have to be realistic about your collection capacity. And so I think it is much better to start small and expand, because emergencies, a huge factor in emergencies are proximity, meaning that the closer it is to you, the more likely it is that it's going to affect you. And the farther it is away, the less likely it is that it's going to affect you. So I honestly would start at my neighborhood level, or if you have an office that you drive to. So if you start at your neighborhood level, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But remember, if you drive to the office every day, or your wife drives to her place of work every day, the office, then that should be in your area study. If you got to go across town and pick the kids up, that school or that daycare or wherever you put your kids, grandma's house, should be in your area study. That should be in what's called your area of operations. Most people simply start off with too large an AO. Again, area studies, AO is area of operations. A couple of years ago, there was a guy, he basically ripped off my work, but he had copied and pasted some of my slides that I used to teach and put them in his own thing. And he didn't give me credit for it, of course. But his talk was entitled, Defending the 5-Mile Radius Around Your Home. Now, realistically, let's just think about how large an area 5 miles is. You get in your car and you drive 60 miles an hour out one way. And you drive for 5 minutes and you're at a 5-mile radius, roughly. Which means you're 5 minutes away. Now you turn around, you're 5 minutes. So that's basically a 10-minute trip out to that radius, which is just nuts. No one is going to need to defend that large an area. Frankly, that guy should really be focused on defending his neighborhood. So much less area than a 5-mile radius. So at any rate, I thought that was a little unrealistic, but it really just goes to show most people start off with way too much area. Another reason why we want to condense this area to just the area where we're going to be active. You're driving to and from work. You go to the grocery store, should be in your area of operations. You go pick the kids up from school, that should be in your AO. Is because those are boundaries that focus our collection. When someone comes to me and they say, Mike, how far was too far away to be gathering information locally? I said, well, let's look at this box. Is it in this box? That's our AO. If it's inside this box, that's not too far away. You're doing a great job. If it's outside that box, then it might be in what's called an area of interest, where I'm still interested in what's happening out there, but I won't be going out there. Like if you live in a river area, you live on a river and close to a river that's in a floodplain, a 100-year floodplain, 1,000-year floodplain, I don't care. Your area of interest is going to be 1 mile, 2 miles plus upriver of you. Because if that thing is flooding up there, it's only a matter of time. And I say 2 miles, it could be 20 or 50 miles ahead of you, upriver from you. So in that case, your area of interest might be very large, but confined to mostly that river. So I think maybe that's one case where you can make that maybe like 100 miles upriver is like eventually going to be important to you. But in very few other cases is something that's 100 miles away going to affect you at all. So that's the number one biggest mistake. Starting off with too large an area. I don't know. I don't have a list, but if I just had to guess what the second largest mistake is, it would probably be overlooking finer details. It would probably be it wouldn't be overlooking finer details. It would be relying too much on online information. Everyone should be out and walking and getting fresh air and sunlight and exercise anyway. So if you're not walking around your neighborhood regularly, I think you should be. So that's probably the second mistake. People rely too heavily on online sources of information and not enough on your physical observation or your physical reconnaissance of an area, of the greater area. Also, I would probably say as a corollary to number 2, or maybe punch it down to number 3, not having a large enough human intelligence network, not having a large enough, not having enough sources, human sources, that have the placement and access that we want to be able to give us the real inside scoop. You're not going to get a lot of inside scoop on open source. But when I call my buddy up who's in the sheriff's office or the local PD, and I say, hey, what's the latest on this event? Or what are the crime trends? Or what are the gang trends in the area that I should be aware of? I'm not going to find that online, but my buddy's definitely going to tell me. So I would say probably number 2 is relying too heavily on open source, which is good. It's going to be your highest, just in terms right off the bat, access to information, highest ROI. But we also need to be developing local intelligence sources, humans that have the placement and access to the information that we really, really need. All right, with that, I will check. Let's see if there's any other questions that have come in. And we'll save, I do have one other question. We'll save it for maybe next week. Good OSINT sources in Europe. Man, I don't know. I honestly don't know anything about it, but just generally, if you have local government websites, I would start there. Do a file type search and see if there's any PDFs hosted on their websites. That can reveal some unique information. PDFs, Word documents, Excel sheets, or whatever the European equivalent is to that, probably the same. Currently, when we do have a handful of people in Europe, and I'm sure this is going to be country specific, but maybe we could start, I don't know, man. Wait, you said you're in The Hague. I don't know, what is that, the Netherlands? I would just Google Dutch OSINT sites or something like that. I don't know. Any classes coming up soon? No, I don't know of any classes coming up soon. I've been just way too busy here, but I will plan some for the fall, which I need to announce real soon, actually. I'm finding it impossible to find like minds near West Virginia. That's extremely surprising to me, considering the demographic and political makeup of West Virginia. All right, one good thing about my neighborhood is chock full of active Army officers and senior non-commissioned officers, along with a ton of vets. I would think that's generally a good thing, but it's good that you know. That's the other thing, too. In my neighborhood, there's a home that's been flying a Trump 2024 flag since probably 2022. And he goes through them because, the flag gets weathered and torn up, and then we walk by there, and he's got a brand new flag out there. Fantastic. But unless I was walking around all the streets of my neighborhood, I would never have seen that because I don't go through there. So that's another good reason why you should get out and walk or maybe drive regularly and just look for changes. Look for the political signs. Look for veteran or military flags, decals. Look at the types of vehicles. See if someone's driving a jacked up monster truck. Probably not voting for Kamala Harris, for instance. How do you counter fast-moving enemy like a scooter mobilized mob in a city? Highly mobile, quick, low profile. Okay. Well, that's more of an ops question, but in general, like obstacles of some sort, man-made or human obstacles. There's probably lots of stuff you can do. Depends on the terrain. Top things to look for in a walk, I just mentioned before, but roughly a year from now, we'll be deep into the midterm election cycle. So I would say between now and then, I'd probably just start looking at political affiliation. All right, I'll get down to the end of this list. All right, no more questions. Everyone, thanks so much. Listen, if you're a first-time viewer, I do this every Tuesday. I spend about an hour with y'all talking through tactical intelligence. We're not talking about big pie in the sky, strategic level stuff. We're looking at your local level, your neighborhood, maybe out to your county, talking about how to gather information, where to gather it, what to do with it once you got it, and how to make sense of your current security picture, your current operational environment, and also look at future events that you could be responding to, real world stuff, wildfires, flooding, riots, whatever. Someone mentioned a couple things about some person that thinks things are going to get nuts. I agree. I do think things we'll go through another period of nuts, like maybe another 2020 eventually. I don't think it's soon. I've been saying since last year, we're not going to have a 2020 part 2 this year. And there's several reasons for that. But the closer we get to the midterms, and definitely the closer we get to 2028, the risk just skyrockets tremendously. Out to 10 years, we are going to go through some level of debt crisis. It could be 10 months away. But we are going to go through some sort of debt crisis, very likely, in the next 10 years. And I know 10 years is an eternity, but it could happen sooner. We're going to go through worsening periods of acceleration domestically, like riots and political violence. And then obviously there's going to be natural disasters, maybe some man-made disasters thrown in there just to keep things interesting. All right, everyone, that's going to do it. Thanks so much. We'll be back. Listen, if you're on Fort Observer, we'll be back tomorrow with the Fort Observer early warning briefing. And then I'll be back here next Tuesday for Tech Until Tuesday, somewhere around 2 p.m. Central Time. Everyone, thanks so much for your support. Thanks for the questions and the comments. And I hope we don't blow out your eardrums, but guess what?